All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday, which is the day before Friday. Thank you for turning in your assignments last night. I'm going to try and get them, or no, that wasn't last night. That was Tuesday night. I'm going to try and get them marked tonight so that we can kind of move forward. Also, later today, I'll share with you the presentation rubric. So, what I'll be marking you on for your presentation part. So, that will be useful for you, I think. So I'll share that with you a little bit later. And we should probably talk about our last quiz a little bit later today too, but I'll wait for now, and maybe some more people will be here toward the end of class, and then we can actually discuss it, right? Although I'm happy to let the people who are here decide, but we'll wait a little bit longer, and then we'll sort it out, okay? Okay, so Zartaj is here, so good morning to you. Jesse's here, good morning, Jesse. And Kayla's here, good morning, Kayla. Okay, let's see. Yes. So yesterday we kind of did a quick review of some concepts here. We're talking about, well, we're still talking about forms of oppression, right? Ways in which society works to privilege some and disadvantage others, right? And so we talked about that. We said that, no, not tomorrow, Zartaj, but we'll talk about it. We'll talk about the last quiz later today. Yeah, so we said oppression is not prejudice or discrimination. It's a society-wide thing, and it's where one group basically has power, right? So their ideas, their ways of doing things, the things that they think are good or bad or useful or not useful, all of those are kind of written into the social institutions of society, right? So their ideas, the dominant group's ideas, are backed up by social and historical and institutional power, okay? So again, no one person has to do anything to get this to happen, right? We, here in Canada, we are basically in an oppressive relationship with Indigenous people, right? Indigenous people are a minoritized group who have less power. Non-Indigenous people are the dominant group, and they're the ones who have power, right? And so I don't need to do anything for that to happen, right? I don't need to do anything. Good morning. I don't need to do anything against Indigenous people to get that to happen. It doesn't matter if I like it or if I don't. The way that society works is that they have a disadvantage, right? And I don't know if I made this comparison before, but maybe I'll make it now. If you imagine us all playing a board game, and we all have our own boards, right? We all have our own boards, and we're playing the board game, but the instructions, we all have slightly different rules, right? And so maybe Eunice gets 2 dice to roll where I only get 1, right? Maybe if it's Monopoly, maybe Eunice starts out with more money than I do, right? And so Eunice is playing the game of Monopoly, doing her best. I am playing the game of Monopoly, doing my best. But who's probably going to win? It's probably going to be you, right? Because you have the advantage, right? You have 2 dice. I only have 1. You started out with more money, so you could buy more things earlier. You'll probably win, right? And you wouldn't be doing anything wrong, right? You're just playing the game of Monopoly by the rules, right? You're just trying to play the game just like I am, but you have advantages that I don't, right? And so, yeah, it's more likely that you'll win. And so, similarly here in Canada, Indigenous people have effectively a set of different rules, right? And it makes it difficult for them to succeed sometimes. That was a bit of a tangent, I'm sorry. Yeah, so one group has power, the other group does not. The other thing we talked about was internalized dominance and internalized oppression, right? And so the idea that people act out their role as dominant group or minoritized group, or they act out the stereotypes that are associated with them, right? And again, these are tough to avoid, right? Particularly for the minoritized group. We heard, I think we heard from a couple of Indigenous people in the documentary, or at least one, where they said, you hear these, you hear these messages your whole life about how, your culture is kind of dumb and you're not good enough and you're lazy and your people are lazy, and you hear that long enough, you kind of start to absorb it, right? You start to believe it, even though it's not true, and even though it's not really in your best interest to believe these ideas anyway. But they're just really hard not to take in, And similarly, the blue-eyed kids in Jane Elliott's class had the same issue, right? There was no truth to the idea that they were not as smart as the brown-eyed kids. Didn't really serve their interests to believe that idea, but they kind of wound up believing it anyway, right? And it had a negative consequence for them. So, where am I going here? Yeah, so that led us to reading this article, right? And yesterday we said this was a bit of a challenging article because it was a real deal academic article, right? Probably a little bit more than I would introduce in this class normally, but it's a good sort of, it's putting our toe into the university world, right? To see if we can read an academic paper, figure it out, and understand it, okay? And again, we said that it was kind of wordy in places. When compared to other academic articles, this is a pretty good one. Some of them are, I have honestly read academic papers where I read it and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, because there's just so many big words and they're just trying to write in such a complicated fashion that it's just like, what are you saying to me? But this one's not bad. So what I asked you to do is to figure these things out, right? What is this paper's argument? How does oppression affect individual interactions? The third question I'll ask you a little bit later. I'd have to try and remember what I was thinking about when I asked it. And so I also tried to give you some guidance or some tips on reading these articles. Again, don't read the whole thing, right? Because you don't have time for that. Maybe when you're really interested in a subject, then maybe read the whole thing. But when you're a first-year student, you got lots to read. Just hit the highlights, And so I told you that most academic papers are structured this way. Sometimes they'll title these things a little bit differently, right? I said literature review. In the article we're reading, Chevella Pittman calls it relevant literature. Whatever, same thing, different title, right? So I said that you could probably safely skip 3 or 4 of those sections and just go to the good stuff, right? Read the abstract to figure out what the article is about, and then go right into, and depending on what the data is, you might actually be able to skip that too, right? If it's pages of numbers on a table, that's kind of hard to look at, right? You can't really do anything with numbers. You have to see it graphed, right, or treated some way. A bunch of numbers is really just, it's hard to deal with, right? So I would go right to the analysis and to the conclusion and figure out what they found out and what it means, right? Why is this finding important? And so this does work for the article we're reading today. I said skip the introduction, skip the theoretical framework, skip the relevant literature part, and skip the methodology part. Actually, I'll give you the methodology part. She interviewed a bunch of professors. The end. Yeah, so that kind of shortens our article. And so from 14 pages, once we subtract all of this, and once we subtract the work cited or the references at the end, you're probably down to 4 pages, maybe just a little bit more. And so you can really kind of cut these things down to a manageable size, right? And so, again, if you see a 30-page paper, that's a lot to read, especially if you've got a few of them. But again, don't quote me on this, but I would suggest that the prof really doesn't want you to read the whole thing anyway. They want you to get the argument, right? What is the important point of this paper? What is it trying to say, right? What is it proving, or what is it disproving, right? And that's really what we need to know. So, in that way, let's return to this article. I gave you some time to work on it yesterday. We got, I think, probably partway through. Didn't finish it? Okay. So let's go back to that article. It's in Microsoft Teams, of course. It's called, what's it called? Race and Gender Oppression in the Classroom. I'm going to put 15 minutes on the clock, and that should be enough to get us most of the way there, I would hope, anyway. So yeah, go back to it, figure out what the argument is, and then we'll talk about the other two questions, okay? And again, big chunks of this I would skip. If you really want to read them, go for it, but I would skip over them and just go for the good stuff. Yeah. It's not like a mystery novel where you need to read the whole thing to get the suspense. Just jump to the end and find out who the murderer was. Okay? All right. I'll let you work. I'll do some reading here just to refresh my memory on what this article talks about, and then we'll talk. maybe just another minute or two. Again, try to get together what you think the argument of this paper is. So the main point that Chevella Pittman here is asking us to believe, and the premises that support that main point. Okay, so let's make an attempt at figuring this out. Again, it's not an easy one because it's, even when we chop it down, it's still a big paper. There's kind of a lot of things going on here, but the argument is not a complex one. And I just put up on the screen here, this is Chevella Pittman here. This kind of feels like, this article feels like her master's thesis, and then she turned it into an article. I'm not really sure. I was just looking for the date that she got her MA in sociology, so I could see if it was the right time, sort of thing. But that's what it feels like for me, is that this was her master's thesis, and she turned it into an article that could be read, I think. Sorry, I was going to say Chevella. Sorry, Dr. Pittman, if I am incorrect. I was just making an assumption there. But anyway, that's Chevella Pittman there. She's a PhD in sociology, as you can see, at Dominican University. She does some other things too. She has a consulting business, I think. But let's return to the article itself. So let's take a stab at this here. What do you think the main idea of this paper is? What's the conclusion here? Online people, I'm happy to hear from you too on this one. On all of them, really, but on this one. What do you think? If there's one thing Chevella Pittman is trying to tell you, what is that one thing? That's a piece of the puzzle for sure, right? So Chevella Pittman's explaining that women faculty of color, so women professors of color, seem to have their authority challenged by white male students. Okay, that's one piece of the puzzle. It's not the conclusion. It's not really the conclusion, but it's definitely a piece of the puzzle. What else? Do you want to take it? Anyone else want to take a shot? You can take another shot if you want to, Eunice.
I'm not sure.
No. All right. So we know that she explains to us that women faculty of color seem to have challenges to their authority by white male students, right? What else do we see happening in the classroom? What else do these women experience? Challenges to authority, right? What is, maybe let's start with that. What does that look like? What are those challenges? What do those challenges to authority look like?
When the male students like contact the women of color
Uh-huh.
teachers, professors, that they just call them by their first name, but when they're referring to a like male, specifically maybe like white
Yeah.
professor, like they use the doctor and like the full name, but
Very, very interesting, right? So one professor says, "Yeah, I'm, a student emailed me and they said, oh, hey, Kate, blah blah blah, Doctor So and So told me I should talk to you," and it's like, oh, well, why is he Doctor So and So, and why is she not Doctor something, right? Why is she Kate, right? That's much more informal, right? It's much more familiar. And it sounds like in the email the student doesn't really know Kate. So they're not really on a first name basis, and with most of your university professors you probably won't be. At least not in a real university. Here maybe we're kind of more relaxed, but okay, so that's one way. How else are these guys challenging their authority? Let's see. Uh, Emily here suggests that she can't be too friendly, right? If she's too friendly, she worries that students won't take her seriously, right? They won't listen to her. Who's this? Alice. Alice says here, white males will often open my office door without knocking. They just walk right in, right? That's not very polite, is it? No, right? You knock. But interestingly, it's when somebody just walks into her office without knocking, interestingly it's white males, right? And you may not have read this because I told you not to read this, but in the methodology section, she says that these women here were asked about their experience with all students, okay? So she didn't ask them, what's your experience with white male students, because then then you're kind of fixing the results, right? The thing is that these women were asked about, what's your experience with students at the university? And these patterns kind of came out on their own, right? So she didn't pull out this information on purpose. It kind of came out when these professors were asked about, what's your experience with students in the classroom? And then this stuff started coming out about white male students, right? So we see a few ways here in which that, what's the next? The next heading is that they challenge their teaching competency. What does that mean? Or how does that express itself in the classroom?
maybe they think that women of color they don't teach as well, like
That's true, right? So they have doubts about these women's ability to teach, right? Their competency in terms of teaching, right? Who says this here? Karen, this professor, she says, this white guy sends me this long email message saying, I have some teaching experience too as an undergrad, and one of the things I know is that if you make a mistake, you're supposed to spend time really correcting it in class. And the fact that you didn't do that really demonstrates to me that this is not a class I really need to be in. Okay, see ya. People make little mistakes all the time, right? And there are two American presidents named Roosevelt, right? She meant to say She meant to say one Roosevelt, she said the other one. She said, whoops, nope, sorry, not that one. This one. Everybody slips up, right? But he seems to have had a bit of a reaction to it. And, she says here his teaching experience was teaching 2 courses to 6th graders. But suddenly he felt that he knew teaching better than her, right? He felt that he was now like above her, or at least at the same level, right? He was like, oh, I know how to teach, lady, and let me tell you, you screwed up big time, right? And it's not the same, right? Like you don't have the experience she has, right? And so, and he's kind of overreacting here, but still the question is, would he have asked this, would he have said that to a white male professor? Hard to know, unlikely, but interesting, right? What else here? Oh, there's the student who took the midterm exam, right? Who complained very loudly, thinking that she didn't, the essay question wasn't very good, and he didn't know what she was asking, and she was being too hard on them, and again, kind of making a big deal about this, questioning her ability to deliver a legitimate exam, right? Although I will say I have had some questionable exams in university. Some profs are not great, but still, there's a pattern here, right? What's the next heading here? Disrespecting scholarly expertise. What does that mean? That's on page 8 of the PDF, if you can see the page numbers, or page 189. Disrespecting scholarly expertise. What does that mean?
Don't recognize and disrespect the scholarship.
Well, yeah, what does that mean? Need some help?
The words are like adult words.
Adult words.
I still use like kindergarten level.
No, come on, Eunice. Okay, but let me help you here. Okay, so disrespecting or disregarding their scholarly expertise, and so Shavella Pittman says there's kind of 2 ways. She said first, they reported that white male students directly and overtly question their knowledge of mainstream scholarship, right? So the idea is that if the teacher is teaching history, these students are like, does she really know her history? Does she really know what she's talking about? I wonder, right? The second way is that they didn't recognize scholarly expertise on issues of race and gender. So they didn't really think of that as real scholarship, right? So if you're taking, if they were teaching a class on, history of a certain minority, right, or history of a certain race or gender, or some sort of race or gender studies, some of these students feel that, oh, this isn't it's not real academics, right? It's not real knowledge, right? It's just kind of it's her opinion kind of thing, right? Rather than being actual factual academic knowledge. Yeah, that's on page 8 of the PDF, and it's on page 189 and 190, if you're using the page numbers of the article itself. So yeah, they're kind of they feel like she doesn't know what she's supposed to know, right? She either doesn't know the sort of mainstream stuff that she needs to know, or the stuff that she does know, right? Her area of specialty is kind of not real scholarship, right? There's history, right? And then there's black history, which is kind of like, oh, somehow that's less, right? That's not as important as real history, quote unquote, right? And maybe let's see. And then there's a last part about threatening and intimidation. So what happens there? What are professors' experiences there?
Which one?
The last heading, which is threatening and intimidation. That's just on the next page there.
The white men might, I guess, think that they're like better than the women of color professors, so they try to look. It's that they have more authority compared to the women professors.
Yeah, but how do they behave? Like specifically, what do they do?
They get aggressive.
They what?
They get aggressive.
Yeah, they get a little bit aggressive, right? They feel a little bit threatening, right? One woman says here, yeah, a white male student confronted her about his grade, and she says here, it made me angry, but it also made me nervous that somebody could feel so. I mean, there was a kind of edge to him, you know, like a threat almost, and it made me wonder, right? So she was a little bit scared, right? He was being kind of aggressive, and he was charged up, right? And she was wondering, like, what is this guy going to do, right? Is he going to become violent? Like, what's going to happen here, right? Yeah, so there's another one somewhere of you know, a student throwing, you know, papers at the professor, right? Because he didn't like her grade. That's just not acceptable in any way. But still, would he have done that to a white male professor? I don't know. Maybe, but also maybe not. So we've kind of got four headings here, right? We've seen that white male students challenge the authority of female professors of color. We see that they challenge their scholarly expertise, right? We see that they challenge their teaching competency, and sometimes they resort to threats or intimidation. And I think at one point, actually, they said one student threatened her with a bad evaluation, right? Or he was going to file a complaint, right? He was going to file a complaint. Don't do this. Don't threaten people. Like you're threatening her. You know, do this or else. If you have a complaint, by all means, file the complaint. Totally do it, but don't do it to blackmail someone into giving you a better grade. That's not cool. If you want to complain, please do it. Even here, especially here, but yeah, don't blackmail people. That's not cool. So we've got kind of four things. It almost sounds like we have four premises, maybe, right? So there's a conclusion. How do we know that's true, Chevella Pittman? Well, because we have evidence of white male students questioning authority, questioning teaching competency, questioning scholarly expertise, and engaging in threats and intimidation toward female faculty of color. So all we need now is the conclusion. What's the main point that those four premises support? Look in the title or the abstract. second last sentence of the abstract, I think. Yep. Second last sentence.
Does it start with despite?
It does. Read it out for me, Eunice.
Despite their
Legitimate.
that authority as professors, these women describe gendered racism in their classroom interactions with students.
Score. There it is, right? Her main point, her conclusion here is that these women are experiencing gendered racism in the classroom, right? And she's calling it gendered racism, of course, because there's an intersection here in these women's identities, right? They are women of color, or they're people of color, sorry, but they're also women at the same time, right? And because we can't separate those two things, these women are experiencing this as two identities at the same time, right? And we can't tell when some of these students are behaving poorly, we can't really tell if it's because this is a person of color or because of whether she's a woman, or it's both at the same time, right? Because none of us can really be just one identity, right? I'm a white person, but I can't just be a white person. I have to be a white man at the same time, right? There's no way for me to be just one and not the other, right? I'm both at the same time. So similarly here, we can't pull apart the effects of racism and sexism. They are woven together, and we don't really know what identity is responsible for what. But yeah, she says these women are experiencing gendered racism in the classroom. That's the conclusion. How do we know that's happening? Well, we have evidence of these students challenging their authority, their scholarly expertise, their teaching competency, and engaging in threats and intimidation towards them, right? That's our argument here. That's the argument that Shavella Pittman is making, okay? Now, since we're looking at the abstract here, I just wanted to point out that look how it's like a tiny little mini version of the paper, right? Most papers start out with a bit of an introduction. They tell you what the topic is about. They tell you the reason for this study, right? Why does it exist? Why do we need to investigate this question? They tell you what they did. They tell you the conclusion, and then they give you their supporting reasons, right? It's kind of all there in mini format, right? So she tells us that we have lots of research on how racism and sexism in the classroom interferes with students' ability to learn, but nobody's really looked at the experience of professors, right, of faculty. And so she looked at it by interviewing all these people, and this is her argument, that this is happening and this is why, right? So again, the abstract is, if it's a well-written abstract, it's gold because it's all there, right? All the pieces of the puzzle are there. And so if you read it, not only can you figure out if this is an article that you want to read, but it also gives you a bit of you know what to expect, right? If you read the article, you kind of know where it's going to go. And again, academic writing and papers, you don't want them to be like mystery novels, right? Don't keep people in suspense. Don't wait till the end to reveal your big thing. Tell people right up front, right? It's not like writing a novel. So again, we should know right up front what Shavella Pittman is going to argue here, and we do, right? She explains it to us very clearly in the abstract. This is what she discovered, and this is her evidence for it. Now, I know it was a little difficult to get there, but do you see how that works? Do you see how she's done that? Okay, good. You want to take a little break? Okay, let's take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll do a couple of other things. Okay. Whoops, wrong button. Okay, and we are back. So, two things. So, let's see. Yeah, two things. I'd like to give you the rubric for the presentation, so the marking guide, and I would like to talk about our last quiz. So, I'm just going to put the marking guide up on the screen here, but it's also in Microsoft Teams, and if you go to the assignments, and if you look for the part 2 presentation assignment, you'll see that I've included it in there. I've added it, I've attached it to that assignment. So you'll be able to see it there. If you have trouble with that, just let me know, but it should be easy enough to find. Yeah, there it is. So this is what it'll look like. I'll try and make it just a little bit, a little bit bigger. Oh.
Now I'm nervous.
Now you're nervous? Don't be nervous. So, yeah, which always works, right? When someone tells you not to be nervous, you're like, oh, okay, now I'm not nervous. Never works. Sorry.
Yeah.
So this is the rubric, okay? And so you'll have. This is kind of rough, and so it's not a question here of point totals, okay? So I'm not kind of like, scoring you points here or there. I'm trying to figure out how well you are doing this stuff, okay? And so I'm looking at your performance in 4 categories, okay? First, I'm going to look at the information in your presentation, okay? Is there enough information there that you've researched? Is it enough to explain your topic? Is it enough to explain your topic? Is there enough? Yeah, I'm gonna. Is there enough kind of meat there?
Oh, it's on the Teams, right?
It is on Teams.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, is there enough information? Is there enough meat? Right? Is it complete enough? Have you told me enough so that I understand your topic? Okay. So you can see I've got a few categories here. Whether you have met the expectation, or whether you have sort of barely done what you were supposed to do, or whether you didn't do what you were supposed to do, or whether you've exceeded expectations, where you've just nailed it. Okay? The second one is argument and critical thinking. So have you taken your research material and what we've learned in class, and have you presented a good answer to the questions that I've asked you, right? So in the original assignment, there was questions. Have you given me a good answer? Has your presentation been a good answer to those questions? And again, think about the argument structure, right? If you can think about your presentation as an argument, that will help you as well, right? It should have a main point, right? It has a question it's trying to answer, and you're going to try and support your answer with research that you've done, okay? Course connections. So this is a little bit of, you don't really have to mention things from the course, but I want to see evidence that you have been in this class, right? I want to see you, use terminology that we've talked about, right? I want you to, I want to see evidence that you've been in here and that you have learned something, right? If you come in here and you give a presentation that like anybody coming off the street could have given, that's like, oh, well, like, were you really here? Like, did you get anything out of this class? So I want to see that you've been here, right? And that you understand some of the things that we've talked about. You understand the terminology, that you can talk about your things in kind of some of the same ways that we've talked about things in here. I want to see some evidence that you've been here, okay? So you don't necessarily have to say things about the class. You don't necessarily have to, don't tell me things we've talked about before, but just show me that you've been here and that you get it, okay? Show me that you get it. And finally, the last part is presentation, okay? So does your presentation look good? Is it properly formatted? Are you up there speaking in a clear way, to the best of your ability? I know it's nervous getting up in front of people and talking. I know that's not easy. So don't worry. See, I did it again. Has anyone ever stopped worrying when someone said don't worry? It's like, oh, okay, I won't.
It's still worry.
I feel so much better now. I know, sorry about that. So this is kind of what I'll be looking at. So do you have enough research and information? Have you synthesized it together to make a good answer to your questions? Do I see evidence that you have been in this class, right? That you've gotten something from it? And again, is your presentation, did you do a good job? Is it nicely formatted? Is it neat? Did you present in a way that was, effective, and it looks like you put some preparation into it? Fantastic. Okay? And again, not everyone is an expert public speaker. I know that. It's not easy. But that's kind of what I'll be looking for. That's not kind of what I'll be looking for. That is what I'll be looking for, because that's where it is. Okay? And so, yeah, I'll make kind of a judgment call on all of those things. I'll give you some comments, and then I'll give you a grade there at the bottom. So again, that's in Microsoft Teams. It's attached to the assignment, the part 2 presentation assignment. So yeah, that's how I will arrive at a mark for that. So Harry says online people will use our presentation on PowerPoint. Yeah, so what you'll do is you'll present, I don't know if we'll use Teams or Zoom. We'll use one of the two, but we'll stream you in that way, Harry, and so you'll have your presentation there, and you'll just kind of share your screen, okay? Yeah, that's how we'll do that, okay? Yeah, so so Harry says our grading will be on how creative we get. Not necessarily creative, right? It's not really about creativity. It's more about can you answer the questions? Can you find information that will help you answer the questions? And can you show me that you have learned something in here? That's basically what it is. So, creativity is okay, but I need to see evidence that you know what you're talking about. Okay? I guess more than creativity, I think I'm looking for expertise, if you will. Kayla says, are the questions you're talking about the guiding questions you gave? Yes, that's correct. That is exactly what I'm talking about. And Zartaj has a question about the quiz, but I'll answer that in a second. Are we okay with this marking guide here? Yes.
Not about the marking guide.
Okay.
On the day of the presentation, are we allowed to bring cue cards?
Sure.
So we can write the main points.
If you feel that will help you, I'm happy to do what you need to do. Do what you need to do. Yeah. Yes. So the question for online people, the question is, is it okay to have cue cards while you're speaking? And I said, of course, yes. Whatever you need to make it go smoothly for you, go for it. Okay. Yeah. Good. Okay. So let's talk about the final quiz. Whoops. Put this here. There. Let's talk about the final quiz. Now, we have 2 more quizzes to do, and we just do not have time. Right? We've run out of time again. So I'd like to have one more quiz. I'd like it to be on Friday. I'd like it to be this coming Friday. Or no, sorry, not this coming Friday. Next Friday. Sorry, next Friday. Next Friday. Next Friday. Next Friday. So not in one day. In 8 days or 7 days, whatever it is. Next Friday, I'd like to have our last quiz. The question is, what do we do with that other 5%? Because the quizzes have been worth 5%, and we're going to have an extra 5% with nowhere to go. So I'd like to take suggestions about what we could or should do with that 5%.
I don't know if it's a good idea, but back at my school, we used to do those where you, I forgot the name, there's the question on there and you pick, and there's like a limit, a time limit, with something, I forgot the name.
There's like a Kahoot quiz?
Yeah, something
Oh.
like that.
Oop, it's all right. Everything's okay. That's why it has a. Did that stress you out?
I thought it was gonna spill on your lap.
Whew. Well, I always close it after I drink out of it. So luckily I do.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. Well, no kidding, right? Yeah. I don't know if I want to do the quiz like that because it's too. Because some people, it's really rapid fire, right? And some people
Just
need
for bonus marks.
a little more time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Harry says here, a free 5%. Yeah, I'm not too keen on that, I don't think. I think I'd like you to work for it, or have worked for it anyway. A very fair act of giving us 5% in the spirit of Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was a month ago in Canada, unfortunately. I know the Americans are having it next week or something, but we already had it. Here's a suggestion. I could take this. So Kayla's suggesting here, I think we should just do it like the one in comparative cultures. So here's the deal I made to comparative cultures. Okay? I said that we'll write the quiz next Friday. It'll be just slightly longer than a normal quiz. So instead of 4 or 5 questions, maybe it's like 7, maybe 8, maybe. So the quiz will be just slightly bigger than it normally is. It'll be worth 5%, and because that quiz is slightly bigger, my compensation to you would be that I'll take that 5% and I will tack it on to whichever quiz you have the highest mark on. So of the 4 quizzes, whichever quiz is the highest will actually be worth 10%, and then all the other ones will be worth 5. Including this one. So if this one coming up is the one you score the best on, that one will be worth 10%. And of course it'll be different for everybody. So it'll be your personal best will be worth 10%. Harry says he thinks that's pretty fair. Alicia says, yeah. Sartaj says, how about I add it to the final project? I don't really want to do that because the final project it's already 35%. And when things get more than that, I think it gets a little scary, right? Little scary. Yeah, I don't really want to go any higher with that one. But yeah, what do you think of that deal? I think Harry's on board, Alicia's on board.
Sure.
You okay? That's good.
I just have to study harder.
There you go, right? Because if you can nail this last quiz, it can be a big boost, right? It can be a big boost. Or if you manage not to nail it and you did better on another one, then that's the one that gets the boost. Everybody okay with that? Can we call it? That's decided? Okay. That's what we'll do. So that'll be next Friday, not this Friday, next Friday. And I will post it in Microsoft Teams and the class range and the whole deal. Okay? Okay. Looks like everyone's on board. Okay, that's good. So with the presentation rubric and with the quiz issue decided, I think I may end it here today and release you, and then we'll see you tomorrow for Friday, okay? Cool with that? Cool? Okay. All right, everyone, thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. Little more racism stuff to do, probably not much. I'm gonna try to wrap up the racism thing tomorrow if I can. I might cut it a little bit short because there's some other things I want to share with you as well. So, but until then, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a nice afternoon. Au revoir.